Thank you to the organizers for giving me this opportunity and a very interesting and a different topic than routine surgical topics. So I hope I do a little justice to this topic. I have no disclosures. We all know that great strides have been made in the improvement of pediatric solid tumors, and even in our country, almost there is a 80 to 85% survival. What was seen in around 10 years back in the West. But notwithstanding that, around 20% of patients diagnosed with pediatric cancers will eventually die of disease. It may be a disease due to tumor progression or maybe metastatic disease. So there needs to be some system in which these children need to be cared for. And this is taken from Piso Poplack, the pediatric oncology textbook, where a particular child says that it's even a war to live it, where to live it is to win it. And that probably tells us how these children go through, and we don't know what goes through because as surgeons, we may be busy, we may not go through the psychological aspects of it. And you look at this child who was asked to draw a diagram, he says that, misery needs company. And when the nursing officer, the nursing students, they talk to this child, the globe changes and there's suddenly happiness, even though it may be for a short while. Adolescents and young adults may have many more feelings like anger, confusion. They may be sad, they may be scared, they may be happy sometimes. So children have a very, very great, extensive variety of things and feelings, which we probably don't go into as much as we should. So hence there is palliative care, and the basic goals and tenets are to relieve suffering, to improve quality of life, to help the family make an informed decision, and to coordinate between clinicians from across the board. That is very important. Another important aspect of palliative care is that the palliative care needs to be offered at diagnosis and not at the end when we have lost all our options and we say, okay, there's nothing else we can do, you go to the palliative care team. No. The palliative care, many studies have shown that the palliative care works very well when it starts off in the beginning at the time of the diagnosis. And this will help the family to take care of end of life care and even take care of themselves when the child is gone. There are several aspects to it, and I will not go into details of palliative care in toto, but I will try to look at the surgical aspects. So, the two more important aspects which I thought were worth discussing was that one, surgeons and clinicians need to be an important part of critical decision making. The sociologists, the psychologists, the Anganwadi workers, the ASHA workers, the play therapists, they may not be able to make clinical decisions. Obviously, they will not be able to make clinical decisions, but critical decision making and risk benefit ratios have to be given in by the surgeons. And I think we need to let go of our egos and we need to talk to the nurses, we need to talk to the psychologists, we need to talk to the social workers, to the parents, to the relatives, and go across the specialities and people who will be looking after this child towards the end of life. So, coming to the surgeon's role, well, when I looked at literature and I thought about what we do, there were two main aspects to it. One is that we as surgeons are there to respect and restore organ function, which will eventually help to improve quality of life. And the second aspect is once we've achieved that, then you need to prolong the quality adjusted life and go into a progression free survival for as long as possible. So these are the important cornerstones of surgical palliation. The surgeons are generally in a long-term relationship with the family, and as pediatric surgeons, we are very, very tuned with this. We see a baby of tracheoesophageal fistula on a neonatal period. We operate that child, we are with the family, and we follow through this patient throughout maybe 10, 12, 15 years, and so many other disease processes, complex anomalies like extrophy, bladder. So, we are tuned to this. But we may be also called in as experts in an acute situation. And this may be when the medical oncology team, the radiation oncology team has an acute problem. That's where they will call you in as an expert. So, whenever a surgeon is called to give some importance, some experience, or some things about surgical, what surgery can be done, he needs to look at five main things which I thought were important. One is, what is the indication of the operation he's being asked to do? Is there actually an indication? Is it too aggressive a surgery you are going to do? Is it underplaying? So you need to be very clear about that. And you obviously need to look at the prognosis of the disease. The risk benefit ratio has to be discussed in detail with the family. And of course, with the anesthesia colleagues, they will discuss with you about post-op ventilation. They will discuss with you about pain management. So they are an extremely important part of this huddle when you do this. And DNR, okay, it may not be very, very illegal in India, but yes, you need to have a OT huddle, what they call. You need to talk to your anesthetist, talk to the nurses, talk to the family pre-operatively and say, okay, if this child goes on 5 inotropes, what do you do? If he arrests intraoperatively, what do you do? So these kind of decisions have to be made pre-op, even though you may not be able to write them down because of the legal status of DNR in our country. But yes, we need to do that. But all of this has to be done with preservation of dignity of the child and the family, and give a very usual, standard, principled surgical care. It cannot be overzealous, it cannot be underzealous. So if you look at procedures which we can carry out, I think there are procedures we can divide them into symptomatic relief and administration of supportive care. So I'll quickly go through a few examples. For symptomatic relief, most of the time we are called for issues with respiratory embarrassment, fluid buildups, obstruction with bowel in the urogenital system, cranial conditions, periphery and limb conditions, and of course, pain relief. And in supportive care, we are called for helping with things like vascular access, dialysis access, feeding. So I'll just give you a few examples. And respiratory embarrassment is something which the pediatricians will call you for. This is a child with a large mediastinal mass with a SVC syndrome and almost short of breath just before intubation. So this child was taken up for a palliative debulking, and once we did the debulking, the baby has done well for the short period in the post-operative period and was quite comfortable. So we gave this child a bit of quality of life for as long as this child has survived. Again, we come with diaphragmatic splintings. Our country and especially the government institutions are known for these delayed cases. And what do you do with this? You obviously go in and debulk because there are no other options. The oncologist has run out of options. And this child has done well around 10 days post-operatively, and then they have refused care because of the aggressiveness of the disease. But at least the child is feeding well. Coming to fluid buildups, luckily for pediatric patients, malignant ascites and malignant pleural effusions are not as common as they are for adult patients. A child may have a lot of difficulty if you go in for repeated ascitic taps. You may have to do some things like cuffed tunneled peritoneal catheters. Very rarely a Denver shunt may be required. When you look at the pleural effusions, you may be called in by the pediatricians and your other colleagues to do pleurodiscs. Sometimes you have pus buildups, you have psoas abscesses. This is a child on ALL relapse and had a huge amount of pus which had to be drained out. So these are all parts of palliation which you can do for these children. Coming to bowel obstructions and urogenital obstructions, the common thing we deal as pediatric surgeons are intussusceptions. We see cases in the middle of the night with thickened bowel, and quite often they turn out to be Burkitt lymphomas. If they're not metastatic disease, then obviously you have to relieve the bowel obstruction. You have to take care of conditions like adhesive obstructions, which are common after a lot of surgical procedures. So those are all part and parcel of the surgical game which you need to do. Sometimes you get cases like this. This is a child, a 14-year-old child who's operated just yesterday, a malignant peripheral nerve sheath tumor, came with massive recurrence and a total obstipation. He was taken up for a colostomy yesterday. He's stable now, but that is all we could offer him at this stage. So these are things which we need to look at. Pelvic masses in the previous times when we had a lot of options of ureterostomies, percutaneous nephrostomies. Some of them are still required to bring down the azotemia, to help the renal function to improve. And sometimes in cases like maybe RMS of the prostate or a bladder neck, you may need to go in and discuss with the family about continent urinary diversions. So these things are important, and these are part of the surgical armamentarium, which most pediatric surgeons are well versed with. Cranial conditions are something which we don't deal very commonly. We look at neurosurgeons to deal with them, but we do VP shunts where and when required. Ventricular access devices may be required for intrathecal administration of several medications. So these are things we can help the oncologists with. And when we come to the limbs, I think the pediatric orthopedic surgeons have come a long way, but sometimes, like in the child I showed earlier, maybe a pelvic exentration, maybe he's too far gone, but pelvic exenterations or hemipelvectomies may be required. We sometimes call in our vascular friends to look at embolectomies. Pain relief is now, pain surgery is now more or less a part and parcel of the intervention radiology, like Professor Kulkarni has already discussed. Cordotomies are a game of the past, but image-guided needle cordotomies are done. Sometimes neurosurgeons need to be brought in for laminectomies. Mostly ablative procedures and neuromodulation procedures are taken over by the neuroanesthetists, the palliative anesthetists, and the intervention radiologists. So we don't have much experience with this now. Coming to supportive care, I'll just talk about a few things. Yes, we call in the endoscopist to do a PEG, or you can do an open gastrostomy, a jejunostomy if required. What is more very close to my heart is dressings. And I think it is very, very important that even in very busy OTs, you need to give time to that slot to that child in the OT to take him for a dressing. Something like perennial sepsis and leukemias who may be doing very badly. You cannot have two people holding the child and doing a dressing in the ward. I know it sounds difficult to do in big government centers, but that is important. Another aspect I found important was that if the surgeon is a leading part of the social support group, if the surgeon picks up the phone and calls the social worker or the play therapist or the psychologist, then things kind of tend to get done faster. I may be biased to this, but I think it's important that you take a lead as a surgeon to be a part of that social support group for this child and try to logistically accumulate all the help you can for this child. So to conclude, I would say that early integrated access to family-centered and community-centered palliative care is a must. Symptom control is our domain which we can help with. And multiple specialties need to be brought in. And you need to do this and you need to take everybody on board. And of course, you need to know whether you need to be less aggressive or more aggressive. And that, I think, comes with time and comes with seeing many, many patients. But we need to be very, very clear about what we need to do. Another aspect which I found was extremely missing in our training was sensitization of surgeons and training of surgeons in palliative care. And it's just that, you send the referral to the palliative team or the anesthetist. So surgeons, the younger surgeons and the trainees should be sensitized for this. So like they say that the goal is to add life to child's year and not simply years to the child's life. And a lot of young children have written beautiful quotes. They are available over in Google. They are available in textbooks. And they want to love everyone and as long as they can. So that's very important. These are some of the resources which are available for young adults and adolescents. And it's good to look at them and go through them. They're quite interesting. So at the end, I would like to say this photograph is taken with consent, that this is a child who was operated for a metastatic Wilms tumor, and she just wants to be happy. So I think the surgeons have a very, very important role to play in palliation, maybe not just as surgeons, but as holistic doctors themselves. Thank you very much.